Sadhguruji, let me start with your thought, because we here have said that it's time to take the right stand to free Hindu temples, but let me understand from you.
So let me bring a little historical perspective to how these things have happened. It all started with a regulation, a Madras regulation. It was called the Madras Regulation of 1817. So this was done by East India Company, not even by the British government. Then by 1840, the resistance built up within their own society that Christian men were managing pagan temples. So resistance came up in England. So in 1840, they wanted to give it back. So they put out a directive and said, okay, hand it over to the trustees. Then they passed a Religious Endowment Act in 1863, with which they made a complete handover of the religious institutions and endowments back to the Hindu community. Then in 1925, they passed a Madras Religious and Charitable Endowment Act. This included all religions. By now, this was a strategy to stem the independence movement in the country, and they found whether it's a mosque or a church or a temple, all of these things had becoming hubs for people to meet and, come together and act. So they tried to take over all religious institutions. But there was a vigorous resistance from the minorities, so they excluded them and brought the act only for the Hindus as it was called as the Hindu Endowment Act, Hindu Temple and Endowment Act, whatever it was called. Then further, they tightened the screws in 1935 that they could give, like a notification to any temple to take it over. And this is all happening before independence, but post-independence, in 1951, they passed this law of Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowment Acts 1951. And many provisions of this 1951 Act were struck down, both by the Madras High Court and the Supreme Court. So during the Kamaraj era in 1959, they passed this Tamil Nadu Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowment Act was passed, which is still in operation right now. With this, over 37,000 temples are in government control. So what is the issue here? The issue is, one thing is, it's a disgrace that in a secular country, that one community… I mean, if you say this in any other country, if you mention this, nobody will believe you. Nobody will believe in India, religious institutions are managed by the government. So secular institutions means they should have no business with any religious institution. When we talk about the Hindu temples, immediately there's a whole group of people who'll say, then take over churches also, take over mosques also. I'm saying the government has no business to touch a mosque or a church or a temple or a gurdwara or anything for that matter. Right now, there is one problem, so let us multiply the problem. That is not a solution, all right? The important thing is, the devotees should manage the temple, because fundamentally, the Indian temples were not created as places of prayer. There is no single person leading a prayer for a group of people. It is largely different types of energy centers where people can go, soak themselves in that energy, whatever, whether you believe or not. It is true for millions and millions of people, for millennia. It has been the experience of people. Whether you believe, you don't believe, that is your issue, but in terms of basic human rights, this must happen. In terms of constitutional rights as fundamental rights, this must happen. But now there's a whole lot of people arguing, their argument is generally, but it was under kings, and kings are also government, so it was always under government. This is not true, because kings were devotees. Kings were very strong devotees, to such a point, in many kingdoms, the deity was the king. The king was a divan or a minister for the deity. So always the deity ruled, only in the deity's name he ruled the country. So they were a different people altogether, and there also the contributions came from the people to build the temples. Above all, these are, especially the South Indian temples, the Tamil Nadu temples particularly, they are magnificent creations of engineering and architecture. If you see what they have done 1000 years ago, 1200, 1500 years ago, you will feel proud of being human because it's absolutely incredible in terms of engineering. The mastery of engineering that they had and how they built these structures is too phenomenal. But they're all being systematically being run down, all the artifacts are being stolen, they're all mostly gone, because people who have no feeling, no heart for the temple are managing the temple. And there are various aspects, economic aspects to it, that is not my interest. My interest is fundamentally, if you want this country to move ahead, you don't discriminate between people. Everybody should have the same rights. This is the whole thing, one country, one law, all this we are talking everywhere, but it's not happening in a very fundamental way. So Tamil Nadu temples have to be released because the tightest endowment act probably is in Tamil Nadu. In other states maybe it's a little more lax, but even that should not be there, that's a different matter. But here it's a proper control. Even if you build a new temple and if it becomes a popular temple, government will send a notification to take it over. This is just ridiculous. How can you do this in a country like India, which is a secular nation, which is a democratically elected leadership, and our constitution gives absolute right for everybody to practice their religion, irrespective of what faith they are. You can even start a new faith and practice it, I'm saying. It's not that the existing faiths. You can start any new faith and practice it. When this is the case, the majority population's places of worship or their temples are being managed by the government is a very shameful thing. I don't even care about the plunder. A whole lot of people are worried about the money and the property. My concern is, a sacred space has been desecrated systematically. And aesthetic aspect of these temples are so phenomenal, but today if you go to many of the Tamil Nadu temples, stone carvings, okay? I'm saying they carved not soapstone or marble as it's done in North India or soapstone in Karnataka. Here we carved granite, very hard stone into exquisite art. And you know what they did? They put silver paint on it, oil paint, enamel paint, for the entire stone carvings. It's somebody, some government officer's idea of aesthetic. What do you do for this kind of thing? This kind of desecration and temple processes have been changed, and without taking into the other aspects, the science of temple building, they've made changes, they've put walls here and there. Aesthetics is being completely, massacred really. So my concern is, temple is being destroyed. Yes, property and wealth and gold attached to it, I think the British took away most of it anyway. What was left, other people are taking it. That is one aspect. Yes, for the temple to be a living temple, for it to be managed well, it needs some wealth for itself to manage, but even that is not even my concern. My concern is, first of all, of fundamental rights. What is in the constitution, why is it that we don't have those fundamental rights? And above all, these are not something that you can once again build. These are not something that you can simply create tomorrow morning. This is something which has taken generations of people to build in a certain way, particularly in Tamil Nadu, and the way it was consecrated, like for example, Chidambaram temple is consecrated by Patanjali Maharishi. How can you destroy that? There are many other temples consecrated by Agastya Muni. How can you destroy that? This is a legacy you cannot destroy. But unfortunately, lot of damage has been done. I think time has come. It should be released. Now people are saying, oh, then all kinds of corruption will happen. It is absolutely ridiculous and insulting to say that the majority community doesn't have a handful of people who have the necessary brains and integrity to manage a temple. When today we are in a time where we are thinking in terms of government should not manage an airline, it should not manage airports, it should not manage ports, it should not manage industry, business, mining, everything should be given to the people to manage in terms of private entities. Temples, somehow government is qualified to manage, how come? It's just ridiculous.